All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John. I am the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book. Usually when we start these, it's just me solo on the screen, but we were having some tech issues. So I want to make sure that if I don't want to remove Joe from the screen and him not be able to hear and all of that stuff. So we're going to leave him on here while I do introductions and let everybody know what's going on. First up, thank you, everybody, for tuning in with us this evening. Before we get started, just wanted to let you know a little bit about what we've got going on at the store. We are in the process of slowly adding some in-store events to the calendar. We're going to have Carolyn Frost in store with us Saturday at 3 o'clock. Then next week, we're going to be chatting with Rob Hart and Delilah Dawson virtually on Wednesday, and Joseph Cannon and his editor, Colin Harrison, on Thursday, also virtually. So when you head to murderbooks.com and you look at the event calendar, you will see things listed as either in-store or virtual. We just got Steve Berry confirmed for an in-store event this summer, so we're slowly starting to add stuff back in. At the moment, we are requiring masks for in-store. If you guys have been to the store, you'll know that the seating area is fairly small, so we want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable sitting over there. Trying to think what else we got. CJ Box coming up, so lots of good stuff. So if you haven't been in a while, come in and visit us. We're starting to see a lot of people who have not been getting kind of out and about in the world coming in saying, oh, it's been a while since we've been in. We love seeing everybody, so yeah, if it's been a while, definitely pop in and come visit us. While Joe is talking tonight, we're going to do this a little bit differently. You know, a lot of times we do a Q&A, but Joe's got a talk that he has prepared for us. So while he's talking, if you have questions for him about this new book, IQ, anything like that, post those in the live chat on YouTube or the comments on Facebook, and we will get to those once he is done. But we are here tonight to talk about his newest book, which is The Goodbye Coast. It is a Philip Marlowe novel, so a little bit different than the usual IQ books. Officially, Joe Ide is of Japanese-American descent. Growing up in South Central Los Angeles, Joe's favorite books were the Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes stories. The idea that a person could face the world and vanquish his enemies with just his intelligence fascinated him. Joe went on to earn a graduate degree and had several careers before writing his debut novel, IQ, inspired by his earlier experiences and his love of Sherlock Holmes, and he lives in Santa Monica, California. How are you tonight, Joe?
I'm really well. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. So The Goodbye Coast came out the beginning of February. We're so excited that we get to hear you chat about this new adventure tonight. So I'm going to turn this over to you to let you talk, and I will see you in just a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Just a little background, briefly. I grew up in South Central LA, in an area that was full of crime and gangs and all the inherent problems of the hood. But as an experience, it wasn't any different than what millions of kids go through every day. My grandparents, they lived in the area because it was close to Little Tokyo. And my family lived with them because we were just getting by. My grandparents were very old world. They spoke almost no English. They were stern, formal people, and very traditional. My grandmother wore beautiful kimonos around the house. She had a Japanese garden. My grandfather collected samurai swords, and they treated me like somebody else's cat. You know what I mean? Like, they couldn't actually kill me, but they didn't have to be nice to me either. My parents aspired to get out of the hood and be pretty much mainstream, and that's what they wanted for their kids, me and my brothers. But we adapted to the neighborhood. Most of our friends were Black, so we co-opted their speech, style, attitudes, all of that, which created this kind of generational cultural tension within the family. Made more so by the fact that my grandparents and my parents wanted us to have some connection to our own cultural heritage, which never really worked out the way they had hoped. My parents made me take a ceramics class in Tokyo. It was taught by a very famous artist. He was from Japan. So I get there, and there's 8 or 10 of these obsessively clean-cut suburban Japanese kids. You know, there I am. I got a toothpick in my mouth and wearing my Ray-Bans indoors. And I know I got to get out of here. So my strategy was this. Everything I made looked somehow phallic. You know, it wasn't obvious, but it wasn't subtle either. You know, it'd be like an ordinary teapot, but you wouldn't necessarily want to pick it up by the handle. My older brother, Jack, Jack got booted out of a Japanese Boy Scout troop for buying his merit badges. He didn't really get the whole Boy Scout concept. And I'm 4 years younger, and I'm really jealous because my poor parents are so proud of him. And what made it all the more aggravating was that I knew it was a scam. I knew my hood rat brother couldn't build a wigwam or paddle around in a kayak. And the sort of net result of all of this was that I was culturally all over the place. It wasn't black, it wasn't white. I felt way far away from being Japanese. So through much of that time, I really felt like a misfit, like I didn't belong anywhere. And I think that's why I was drawn to the original Sherlock Holmes. I mean, here's a guy like me. No, he's a misfit. He doesn't belong. He's not a badass. And yet he was able to overcome the obstacles in his life with just his intelligence. And that was a very powerful idea for me. I'm a small kid in a big neighborhood. And what that meant to me was hope, that there was a way for a kid like me to face his own world and not be afraid. When it came time to write a book, all of that came together almost by itself, and Sherlock in the Hood was born. It was my only idea. It's not like I was choosing from a list. So I have a new book, The Goodbye Coast. D8, could you bring me a copy? How it happened. The agent for the Raymond Chandler estate was in the airport, and he liked the cover of IQ, and that's why I picked it up, and that's why he read it on the plane. He commended it to the estate, Raymond Chandler estate, and they decided, well, give the kid a shot, and they were looking for someone to write a contemporary Marlowe. It was very exciting, and but it was also daunting. I mean, here was an opportunity to disappoint hundreds of thousands of Marlowe fans all around the world. I saw the task as sort of twofold. One was I had to respect the original character, but at the same time make him contemporary. The question was, what's contemporary? I couldn't just take Humphrey Bogart and set him down on Rodeo Drive driving a Tesla and listen to Jay-Z. It was more about bringing the original Marlowe's worldview, his attitude, his cynicism, his spirit, for lack of a better word, forward into this new character. But the new character had to be engaging enough to entertain those people who had never heard of Philip Marlowe. So in the end, I had to write a good detective novel. Whether I did or not, it's still up in the air. That's the book cover, by the way. I get asked about creating characters, about the IQ books as well as this new book, but and the simplest, most direct way is through appearance, presence, the vibe. In Goodbye Coast, Marlowe's new client is Kendra James. She's a movie star and a notorious diva. She hires Marlowe to find her runaway stepdaughter. But here's their first meeting. Kendra sensed someone was there, like a change in temperature or a breeze through an open window. Marlowe was wearing a dove gray suit, obviously handmade, black silk tie undone, and a milky white Egyptian cotton shirt, thread count in the 180 to 200 range, and bespoke Oxfords, shine but not shiny, understated to everyone except those who appreciated fine clothes. "Hello, I'm Philip Marlowe," he said. He had presence, she decided. Surprising for someone who was probably in his early 30s, he was very good looking. but he wore differently than the other handsome men she had known. It was as if he was unaware of his appearance and would be surprised if someone remarked on it. He wasn't the least bit intimidated by this A-list celebrity sitting right in front of him, and most people were. It was galling. Marlowe met her gaze, and she was instantly uncomfortable. His eyes were the kind that took in everything but gave nothing away, the kind that didn't notice but inhaled, the kind that weren't neutral but assessed, gleaned, and adjudicated. That was the first thing I wrote. And once I had the eyes, I built it out from there. I don't outline, and I don't know what I'm going to write until I write it. So as I wrote a scene, I started adding qualities to Marlowe as the scene demanded: where he lived, his economic status, his relationships. I'm adding these things as I go. I like to let characters define themselves. You know, Kendra, the diva's diva, is having a party for her celebrity friends. She's on the downhill side of her career, and she wants the business to know she's still here. Now, Marlowe wants to come and bring a couple of guests, and Kendra's outraged that he would even ask, but he coerces her into the invitation, and this is her response. Fine, Marlowe, you win, but I want your so-called guests to attend my party. I have conditions. First, don't bring some yokels here from Donkeyville, Oklahoma, playing the harmonicas and scratching their ass cracks. And they are not to talk about boll weevil season, or how they eat roosters for breakfast, or that they only wear shoes at funerals and hay rides. And remember, they must look like they belong. And that means you and your illiterate clodhoppers must wear decent clothes. And by the way, I don't like germs. If you and your hayseeds bring some mutant strain of hoof and mouth into my beautiful home, you won't get a job finding dead flies on a windowsill. That's probably everything you need to know about Kendra. You know, it comes down really to creativity. You know, the ability to focus on a single prompt. And that's what creativity is, really. It's everything you've ever done or said, focused on a single prompt. Say I'm trying to figure out a point of contention between Marlowe and the character. I'm not choosing from the list. It's like my life is the sun, shining through a magnifying glass and focusing until I get a flame. The key word there is focus. You know, to stay on something until it's resolved. You know, I hear aspiring writers say, I have writer's block. There's no such thing as writer's block. All that means to me is that you got out of your chair. If you don't want writer's block, stay in your damn chair. You know, there's a tendency these days to define character in a couple of different ways. One is lifestyle. You know, he lives in a penthouse, he drives a Maserati, and expertise. He can pilot a helicopter. He can, you know, he knows all these martial arts, and there's nothing wrong with that. I use those kinds of things myself, but it's not really the essence of character. The essence of character is what that person is thinking and feeling before, during, and after he does whatever he does. You know, I'm not all that interested in a character that shoots people. I can shoot somebody. You know, what interests me is what that character is thinking before, during, and after he shoots somebody. And that will distinguish that character from every other character that shoots people. But there also has to be an element of humanity. Now, Emmett I needed Marlowe to have a sidekick. I wanted somebody contentious, you know, who would push back, who knows Marlowe, what buttons to push. And so I immediately went to family. Marlowe has a father. His name is Emmett. He is elderly, a grouch, and decidedly old school. Someone is trying to kill Kendra's daughter. Her name is Cody. And Marlowe stashed her at Emmett's house for safekeeping. Now, Marlowe has I mean, Emmett has no idea how to deal with a 17-year-old girl who worships the Kardashians. And in this scene, he's trying to just make contact. What are you doing, Emmett asked. Twitter, she said. I'm going to take a wild guess and say that you have no social media. I can't even think about what you post. You know what I wouldn't post? Emmett said. He took a moment to organize his thoughts. First of all, cats. Fucking cats. What makes people think that anybody wants to see one more photo of Fuzzy coughing up a hairball or licking its own patootie? Everybody's seen that crap a million times. At some point in their lives, everybody's owned a goddamn cat. Really, I don't get these people. What are they thinking? That their cat is special? Special how? The cat plays softball? The cat shits in the toilet? The cat has a graduate degree from the University of Meow Mix? I've got news for these folks. Nobody's paying attention. Nobody cares about your ordinary, common as weeds kitty cat, whether it's making its own litter box or dancing the cha-cha-cha. Elmer Leonard said, everybody talks, meaning that every character can say exactly what he or she wants to say in their own vernacular. And the effect of this is to elevate the character. You know, Emmett is no longer just and grouchy old man. He's this particular grouchy old man. If you're a working writer or an aspiring one, you are by definition a student of human nature. You know, there's no more 1,000-yard stare. You know, you are alert. You're looking for the unusual, for discrepancies, for anecdotal things, human things that will add texture and depth to your writing. Jerry Seinfeld said, comedians are always thinking comedy, and it's the same with writers. There's a 7-Eleven that I frequent when I need something with 7-Eleven. So there's always this group of kids in the parking lot, and they're loud and they're rowdy and they drink, they smoke dope, they have fights. And the manager of the 7-Eleven, Danny, you know, he doesn't know what to do. You know, he can't call the cops every 3 minutes. So I go there the other day, the parking lot. Well, Danny's playing classical music through the PA speakers outdoors, and the parking lot is empty. The kids just disappeared. Now, I think, well, what if Danny was my character? You know, and he did that. He would no longer be, you know, a store manager. He'd be a smart store manager, and a character. I was getting on the freeway the other day. There's a homeless guy on the center divider, and you know, he's all bedraggled. There's a shopping cart, a little cardboard sign. So I pull up next to him, and the sign does not say food. It says alcohol. So I rolled down my window, I gave him $1, and I said, you know, at least you're honest. Now, you know, I think, well, what if my character did that? It would say something about my character, and it also says something about me, I guess. You know, being a student of human nature means that when you go into a social situation, you're not a participant anymore, you're a spy. I walk my dog about the same time every day. And so we're going along, and here's this woman coming out of her house, and I know she was waiting for me because she's a little too eager and a little too cheerful to be going out and getting the mail. So we converge on the sidewalk, and she immediately starts talking about India. You know, she's telling me, you know, I took a raft up the Ganges, I ate street food, I didn't get sick. I went to the temple with all the rats. Now I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, she's not really telling me about India. What she's telling me is, look what an adventurous person I am. Look what a risk taker I am. I'm not just some rich lady lying around my house. I'm out there in the world. I'm cool. And because I know that about her, I can write about it. My first girlfriend, Stephanie Farrington, she lived 2 doors down from me, and she was 12, so I guess I was 11. And she was a head and a half taller than me and outweighed me by 30 pounds. My brother said that when we held hands, she looked like a ventriloquist with a Japanese dummy. I always thought that was a little harsh. But when I wrote the first IQ, there's a running character named Dorana, homegirl, grew up on the streets, and I needed an attitude for her, sort of a way she faced the world. Now, everybody was struggling in the neighborhood, but Stephanie's family was destitute. There was never any food in the house. She had a little brother, a little sister who was always running around half naked and crying. And her mother just kind of walked around with a sawed-off piece of broomstick and just sort of whacked anybody who was close. And Stephanie came out of that experience with a certain attitude. And that was, whatever I get in this life, I'm going to have to take. And whatever that is, it won't be enough. And Stephanie complained about everything. It didn't matter what it was. It was always the wrong size, the wrong color, not the one she wanted, not the one she saw on TV. I shared my lunches with her, and she complained about the sandwiches because nothing would ever fill that empty well of needs that were never met or make up for her life of deprivation. And because I knew Stephanie, I could write around it. Just a second. I have so many notes that I get confused sometimes. So I was talking about characters and making them human. Well, there's in the third book in the IQ series, Wrecked, there's a character named Walzak. He's the bad guy. He's ex-CIA, committed atrocities at Abu Ghraib, runs a big security company like Blackwater. So we know he's powerful and ruthless, and there's absolutely nothing new there. Now, Walzak is hunting for a woman named Sarah. She has photos of him at Abu Ghraib doing horrible things. And this is his reflection. He envisioned photos appearing in the New York Times and on CNN. He could see the media outrage metastasizing to every country in the world. His name synonymous with cruelty, depravity, and perversion. The most excruciating part, his family. The business was Earth and he was Atlas. But his family was his only true source of happiness, and the only people he knew who still saw him as a patriot, a hero, and a great human being. He had to destroy those pictures. The thought of his darling wife, seeing him rape a helpless woman, made him sick. The thought of his precious son Noah, knowing his father was a monster, made him want to die. He'd never been so afraid. Not when the desert night was lit with tracer rounds and the mortar shells exploded so close you thought you were finished, and you could hear your fellow soldiers screaming and dying in the rubble. None of it frightened him more than the revelation of his beastly heart. Without that, I don't have a character. I mean, we may not like people like Walzak, but we can identify with his vulnerability, his family. We can invest in him, even though he's a bad guy. I mean, who really cares about a car chase? Unless you're invested in the people in the car. There's a writer named John Rogers who wrote, "You really don't understand an antagonist until you understand why he's a protagonist in his own version of the world." I think that's true. I mean, if you ask a drug dealer if he's a bad guy, he'll say, "No, I'm not a bad guy. I'm just out here taking care of business like everybody else, like we all do." there's one of the things I get asked is, what's the most difficult thing to write? And it's these emotions between the emotions. You know, those moments that are so ephemeral. You know, they're just there and gone, or you just can't find the words, you know, to express that. My my older brother Jack, he's something of a thug. He was something of a thug in high school. He he was into drugs, and he got arrested a number of times. He was in an all-black gang called the Outlaws. And when he was in high school, he had a girlfriend named Sugar. Sugar was always spilling out of her clothes. You know, she had an attitude. She's always chewing gum, and if you looked at her wrong, she'd get in your face. So one day, it was Sunday, and Jack brought her in the house because he thought everybody was at church. So I'm there, and she pays no attention to her. I'm a houseplant, and Jack realizes that our very prim and proper mom is coming this way. So Jack rushes off to steer her in another direction, and it's just being Sugar. So this awful, you know, tense, quiet, and then my grandmother comes in. So there's a Sugar and my grandmother standing there looking at each other. You have never seen two more different people. You know, there's my grandmother, straight out of a 16th century samurai movie, and there's Sugar. You know, could have been a stand-in for Little Kim. So I'm just frozen with suspense. I mean, I know what's going to happen. You know, was my grandmother gonna get gonna lash out with a karate chop? Was Sugar gonna get in my grandmother's face? So I don't know what's gonna happen. And then finally, Sugar says, "Do you have any Dr. Pepper?" And my grandmother said, "No, I have a tea." And Sugar said, "I don't like tea." And my grandmother said, "No, you come, I make tea." And the two of them went off into the kitchen again. Now, I don't really know if that scene's going to make it into a book, but what I distilled from it was an incredible sense of tension from just two people standing in a room looking at each other. I thought that was remarkable. And what was even better was the look on my brother's face when he went into the kitchen and saw Sugar and my grandmother having tea together. And that's the kind of thing I want to get down on the page, above and beyond story. Right around the corner from my house, there was a liquor store, A&J Liquor. And the winos used to hang out there and drink Thunderbird all day. And one of them was a man named Beck. Beck was elderly, he was very tall, and he had a very dignified way about him. You know, he reminded me a little of Morgan Freeman. And Beck was always immaculate. You know, he wore a fedora, you know, the kind with the little feather in it, herringbone sport coat, shirt and tie, brown slacks with a crease in them, and brown and white spectator shoes. Beck was sharp. And he did this every day. So my brother's name is Jack, so he called me Little Jack. And he called my mother Mrs. Jack. So every morning, my mom would go down to the bus stop, catch a bus for work, and Beck would be waiting for her. And she'd say, "Good morning, Beck, how are you?" And Beck would say, "Well, you know, I'm old and slow, Mrs. Jack, but I'm doing all right." And Beck would stay with her until the bus came, just to see that nobody messed with her. And nobody ever did, because Beck carried a gun. And I have this image of it, you know, this tall, elegantly dressed man, and my little mom standing at the bus stop talking like they were old friends, and I suppose they were. And there was such a wistfulness about it, a sweetness. And that's the kind of thing I try and get down on the page, above and beyond the story. You know, being a writer it's a profession. You know, it's a career. It's not an activity. It's not a hobby. It's not like, you know, I'm going to go rock climbing this weekend. You know, it's a profession like any other, like being a nurse or a veterinarian or a blacksmith. It's multiple skill sets learned over a long period of time. Aspiring writers don't like to hear that long period of time thing, but there's no way around it. You know, you hear somebody say, "Well, I'm gonna write a bestseller in 6 months," and I'm thinking, you know, no, you're not. What other field of endeavor would that logic apply? You know, I'm going to be a great carpenter in 6 months and build a house. No, in 6 months you're going to cut off your leg with a bandsaw. The the long period of time thing. It's really like you're going to be a chemical engineer starting today. You study. You have to learn your craft, and you know the aspiring writers, their first attempt is usually lousy, and why wouldn't it be? You know, they're learning a new craft, and that could be very, very trying and discouraging. And it's very tough because the biggest thing standing between an aspiring writer and getting published is the writing itself, separate and apart from content. You know, a story, character, possible franchise, you have a lot of great ideas. Nothing will save you. If you don't write at a professional level, you're done. You know, the gatekeepers are agents and editors who have read everything, and they have spent their lives reading and evaluating books. And they, you know, you can't get anything past them. You know, if the writing isn't there, you're really done. It's harsh, but that's true. You know, the agents and editors have hundreds and hundreds of alternate things to read. So if you're an aspiring writer, you know, you really want to give it your best shot. You know, you do not want to, you know, put the book out there until you're absolutely ready, because that gatekeeper will not read a second draft, and will not want to hear about your second, because you've disappointed them. You've wasted their time. So let's move on. When I first started writing IQ, well, I was a screenwriter before I wrote IQ, and I worked a lot, but none of the things I wrote ever got made. You know, it was just incredibly frustrating. You know, I'd work on something for months, and then only to have it fall out for some, you know, Hollywood reason. You know, the head of the studio got fired. The budget's too big. The star dropped out. There's just one after the other, and it got so frustrating that just opening the screenwriting program repulsed me. I could not do it anymore. So I quit. You know, nobody noticed, but I quit. I moped around for a long time, felt sorry for myself. And then I realized, you know, I really have to make a living. And the only thing I know how to do is write. There'd be nothing on my resume except, you know, failed screenwriter. So I wrote 12 lousy screenplays in a row. And I had an agent who would send them back with notes that say, "This is terrible. This is boring. Nobody will want to see this. So 12 scripts in a row like that. And on the 13th one, I wrote a good one and it sold it to me. I started to work. So I thought when I started IQ that I had the writing part down. I am a professional writer and I'm making a decent living. What I discovered was that my narrative prose was terrible. It was awful. I made every mistake a new writer can make. My writing was awkward and clunky, and it was too long. It meandered. It didn't say enough. Just one thing after another, and I couldn't believe it. If you want to know how bad your writing is, read it out loud. Read something by a writer you admire, like the first 5 pages, and then read your own writing out loud for 5 pages. And it was really humbling. I mean, it took me a year to learn to write just clear, decent prose. I had to go back and read things like Elements of Style and On Writing Well. You think, well, I don't have to do that. I had to do that. So that first year, I'm writing as I'm learning how to write. And that's something that the new writer will just have to do. Do you know how to write? Do you know your craft? And it's a very humbling thing to do. I have a neighbor who's very well known in his own profession. He has professorships at Oxford and at UCLA. And he asked me to read his book. He's my neighbor. I couldn't get out of it. So I read it, and it's just terrible. I mean, it's awful. He's written books and professional papers with a long resume, but this was awful. And I didn't know what to tell him. Because somebody gives you something to read, 99 times out of 100, they don't want notes. They want affirmation. They want you to say, good job. So this time I had nothing to say. I didn't know what I'm going to tell him. He lives across the street. So fortunately, he got into an accident and had to go back to Austin to be with his family. So I got out of it. But that's an example of coming out with something when you're not ready. It takes commitment to write a novel, to write a decent novel. And people say that all the time, but what does commitment mean? First of all, it means that you don't do things that will get in your way. Are you going to write, or are you going to go to Pilates, or are you going to play softball? Are you going to feed the baby? If you're serious about writing, all that comes later. You write first, and that comes later. And the baby will be all right if he misses a meal or two. And the other thing is, you have to work. You have to work, and you have to eliminate things that are distractions. You know very well that if you start playing a video game, that you're not going to stop in 15 minutes. You're going to play for hours. Or if you're binge watching something, you're going to be watching 4 or 5 episodes. And those are the kinds of things that are distractions, that are excuses. And a writer has to learn to not do the things that are distracting. And this whole work habit thing this is not exclusive to me. I mean, practically every writer I know does some version of this, but I work every day and 7 days a week. And I have to, because if I let my book go, I lose momentum. I'm just assume I'm going to write. I mean, I wake up in the morning, I just drink 3 cups of coffee and I sit down. And there's really nothing romantic or or glamorous about being a novelist. I wake up around 7:30, I have 3 cups of coffee, and I sit down and I go to work. And there I am with, I'm working in my pajamas. I got taco juice on my keyboard. I'm talking to my dog, and that's me. Okay. I work till about 1 in the afternoon. Then I go do what I have to do, and then I come back around 4 for another couple of hours. And that's just the kind of work it takes. And I'm not unusual in this regard. So if you're going to be a writer, you can look forward to that. If I haven't made the job, sound tough enough already. As I said, when I quit screenwriting and started to write a novel, and then I finished a novel, the only skills I had were writing. There's nothing of a practical nature I could do with any sense of proficiency. I'm one of those guys who, if you give them a screwdriver, I just like that. My brother said that if you were lost in the Amazon and you needed to survive, Joe is the one that you would kill and eat. Which I always thought was a little harsh. But that's really me. And so you can understand why I'm grateful to all of you for supporting my work. It's really writing is really, a privilege. It's a luxury. And it's the life I always wanted, but never really thought I'd lead. If you have questions, I'll try and answer.
Okay, so we do have a couple. So first, I wanted to ask Joe, do you think that having written IQ, that was, that you sort of took some of those elements of Sherlock and put them into something new, do you think that helped or set you up for success to try to, like you said, kind of do a contemporary version of Marlowe?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could think of my IQ books as practice. Mm-hmm. Just, a long practice of the craft. And when I took the job, I was pretty confident about the writing part.
Yeah.
And I write the way I write. And so that part of it wasn't the scary part. I learned a lot from writing the IQ novels. And so that really helped me with the Marlowe.
Did you go back and read any of the original Chandler books to help prepare you for this, or did you want to not have that so fresh in your mind while you were working on it?
No, I reread 4 of them, and that was intimidating. Nobody writes like Chandler. Yeah. There's Chandler and everybody else. His writing is so good, and he writes those books that are part genre and literature at the same time, and it's just brilliant work. But yeah, I read those novels.
Do you have a favorite?
I guess The Big Sleep. That was the first, because it was the first novel I read, and I was in my 20s. And I think it had impact because it was the first. So, yeah, that was my first Marlowe.
So since this is the first time since you started publishing the IQ books that you've taken a break from Isaiah for a year to do something else, do you miss him, and are you itching to get back to him, or did you welcome the break?
I really welcome the break. I started writing the first IQ in 2012. And
Wow.
I finished it finished in 2015.
Mhm.
So I've been writing IQ novels for a long time. And it's good to change worlds. It's good to have another challenge. And most of the writers I know feel that way, that a new challenge is energizing. So it was really good for me. Really good for me. I didn't miss writing an IQ novel,
Mhm.
but I'm still enthusiastic about it. I'm writing IQ 6 now, and I'm still enthusiastic. I'm still enjoying it.
Yeah, I always find as a reader, you can kind of always tell when writers who write a series, if they take a break to do something different, you can always tell kind of when they go back to the series that they just feel like refreshed. And I think, because our readers at the store, will realize that too, or they're like, oh, you got to go do something else and you just come back and you have this like, it's just fresher and you can tell that like you're enjoying, not that you didn't enjoy writing the character before, but there's just like a different spark there after getting to take a little bit of a break and coming back to that world.
It's very true. Very true. The breakouts. Yeah.
So do you think that you will do any more Marlowe books, or was this just a one and done?
That's a complicated.
Yeah.
The Raymond Chandler estate licenses the use of the character, and they don't have any editorial input. The publishing company is responsible for all of that. And there are other Marlowes out there. There are other Marlowes being written. So whether or not the estate wants to go at it again with me, I don't know. And whether the publishing company will be interested really depends on the numbers. And it's hard for me money-wise because the estate takes $3 out of every $10.
Oh wow!
So you have to think about, whether you want to do it and lose money. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't have to make the decision yet, but we'll see. I would like to write it. I had fun.
Yeah. I kind of thought that would be the answer. I know a lot of times when estates kind of license these things, it's usually hey, let's give you one and see what happens with it before we commit. I know Sophie Hannah said when she started doing the Poirot novels, that was sort of the same thing. They were like, okay, we trust you to do one of them. We're going to see how this works. And then, it always, like you said, it kind of comes down to how well things sell and things like that. So I thought that might be the answer. When we were talking about when we were doing your intro, we talked about, how you found an early love for Sherlock Holmes. Let's talk a little bit about reading taste. If you are reading for pleasure, what do you pick up now? Or do you gravitate towards mystery fiction, or you do try to read outside of the genre while you're writing it?
I'm reading a genre book now by Tom Rob Smith. It's called Child 44. And it's a wonderful book. Yeah. It's a thriller. It has historical sweep and brilliant character. Everything you want, in a novel, in a thriller is there. I'm reading that, and I'm very happy doing it. I've also been reading. I read other things too. It's just at this moment, I'm reading a lot of Thomas Perry. If you want to learn how to write straight ahead prose that expresses anything you want to express, read Thomas Perry. His Butcher's Boy is one of the best thrillers ever. So I'm reading that. It's reading people who are like that is really school for me. And it's the difference between reading a book and studying it. You're trying to come away with a blueprint. It's like, how did he do that? And you study the mechanics. So it's been illuminating reading these.
When one of the first virtual events that we did when things got started virtually, we chatted with Jim Rollins, and he was talking about when he was working on his Sigma books, he kind of knew what he wanted to do. So the first thing he did is he went out and literally bought a copy of Jurassic Park and tore it apart and was like, okay, when do you see the first dinosaur? When does the first person die? And just to figure out all of that pacing. And it's always interesting to hear just how much you can learn by reading other people like that. And it's always refreshing to hear authors actually say that they do, because it's always the worst when you ask an author, oh, what have you been reading lately, or who do you read? And they're like, oh, I don't read. I'm like, how do you write and you don't read?
Yeah, exactly. You know, all the masters are really on my bookshelf.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if you want to learn how to write dialogue, read Elmore Leonard.
Yeah.
It's if you want to learn to write suspense, read Joe Nesbo. You know, he cranks it up until you can't stand it anymore, and then he cranks it up some more. And the way he does it is brilliant. You know, another guy I just really, really admire.
Yeah, so interesting that you mentioned Child 44. I really loved his book, The Farm, too. And unfortunately, I think that was the last thing he did, because he's done the opposite. He started with books, and I think he's now writing for TV or writing for screenplays. And so it seems like we tend to lose a lot of our mystery authors to the other direction, to doing kind of TV, especially since there's so much good TV out there now.
Yeah, it's attractive to a lot of novels because TV is so much better. The content is so much better, and most of the exciting things are on TV, not movies anymore. And it's also a steady job. And, you know, it pays well, and so for a lot of reasons, novelists are doing screenplays. You know, Ben Winters is writing a TV show, and a bunch of other people.
Have you been tempted to dip your toe back in that world, or are you happy in novels now?
I'm happy in novels now. I don't want anything to do with it. It's an awful business. Unless you're an A-list writer, this is terrible. This is a terrible business. You know, you go out for something and you pitch, and you don't know there's 10 other guys they're seeing. And the people you're pitching to, you know, one of the last things I did in screenwriting, one of the things I left was I was pitching to a 23-year-old executive, and he thought Pretty Woman was a classic, and I just went, I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. No. So screenwriting holds no appeal. The IQ TV show is still in development. I sold that book in 2015.
Oh, wow.
And it's still in development.
Yeah.
So I just can't worry about it. You know, like when I was a screenwriter, you always wait for the phone to ring. But I have a day job now, and I just put it out of my head. I hope it's good if it's ever made.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you were working on IQ 6. Can you give us a little bit of a hint about what Isaiah's up to in the new one?
At the end of the last book, Smoke, his girlfriend, Grace, was kidnapped by a guy named Skip, who was a hitman that we met way back in IQ 1. And so when Isaiah hears this, he immediately puts on his clothes and jumps in his car and heads to go help her. And that's where the 6th book will pick up. Isaiah looking for Grace. And that's kind of the central through line. And Skip has a long history with Isaiah, and they play cat and mouse. And so it's
Awesome.
That's what it's about. And yeah, it's fun.
Perfect. So I think that is going to about do it for us this evening. So for anybody who might have tuned in late, we've been chatting with Joe Ide, whose newest book, The Goodbye Coast, which is a Philip Marlowe novel, just came out at the beginning of February. We've got copies of it as well as all of the IQ books in store. So if you are interested in ordering one from Murder by the Book, I've been dropping links in the chat. I also dropped links to Child 44 and The Butcher's Boy if you want to check out Tom Rob Smith or Thomas Perry. If you missed any part of our chat, you can rewatch once we're done. YouTube and Facebook will archive it, so it's up there. If you want to see our chat with Joe last year when Smoke came out, that is also archived on the Facebook and YouTube channel as well, if you want to hear him talk a little bit about that one specifically. But Joe, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It was such a great pleasure to get to chat with you again.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Ask me back anytime.
Yeah, take care. Hopefully next time when the next one comes out, when IQ6 comes out, hopefully, fingers crossed, the world will be a little bit more stable and we'll get you back to Houston to come see us.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Thanks so much.